So, um, as a public speaker, I recognize that there are things that I do that are recognizable and or mimicable. I found that out the hard way while we had the wonderful opportunity over the summer to go to Europe. In one of the days we were in Greece, and we happened to be. This was like a super powerful moment for me personally. There's a rock, a place in Greece called Mars Hill. Rock, and it's very clear. Maybe at some point next year I'll preach the message from there with a few pictures, because it's like so obvious the area. And then my kids, who are less emotional, go, "Dad, do." I'm like, "What is that?" They're like, "Preaching hands." I'm like, "Preaching hands?" And they're like, "Yeah, do the preaching hands." So that is my middle child doing the preaching hands in the shadow of the Greece. Yeah, so anyway, little did I know then that this would become the family thing. Yeah. So for the rest of vacation, I was getting photos of preaching hands. Here's my dad. In a very, and this is the picture. You're gonna have to kind of turn sideways. I think, yeah, there's my nephews at the Eiffel Tower doing the preaching hands. I'll fix it for next service. I forgot to fix that. I've been getting, ever since the summer, I've been getting photos of people in my family doing preaching hands all around the world. And so I went back. So there's a thing. This has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But if you're a public speaker at all, there's something that you can do if you're like, "I wonder how I'm perceived." Film yourself talking and then watch it at 2x or 3x speed muted, and you will see all the things you do. And I do this the whole time. So I'm like, touche. But there are things in life that we mimic because we see, we experience, and everything in our life. I was just having this conversation this last week with someone. Everything in our life is something we either recreate or reject. We want to replicate it in our life, or we want to reject it. And as I'm going to talk about today, so often is the case, we mimic how we view money. And in our lives, especially in the day and age that we live, it is so easy to be consumed by our consumption. And the more we get consumed, the more it causes us to be self-centered and make us the center of our existence. And so today I want to talk about generosity. And I want to talk about yes to generous. Here's the reason why I said it that way. Let me give two quick things. First, I recognize that this is on Give Love Sunday. Number two, that is not intentional. I had this message slated for a couple weeks ago for a variety of different reasons. It got punted around and landed on Give Love Sunday, which in my opinion is the least effective Sunday for this message to land on, just so you know. And let me explain why. Here's why. Because someone's like, "Oh, a really wise pastor would put the sermon about generosity and money on the Sunday of Give Love." No, he actually wouldn't. And here's why. Generosity is not a random act of giving. Those are not the same thing. Here's why I say that. I would argue that by and large, the majority of us believe that we are generous. So if I asked you, "Are you generous?" you would say, "Of course I'm generous." In the same way that if I asked you, "Are you a good person?" you would say, And if I said, well, why are you a good person? You would take that general statement and you would go back to the last singular good thing you did and tell me a story about the one thing you did that proves how you are a good person. So you would say, well, of course I'm a good person. Last week, I had a coworker that was kind of fumbling around with their stuff, and I stepped in and helped them, and I kind of rescued them from this thing, and so of course I'm a good person. And so you used a singular event to prove a series of decisions and a mindset and a whole host of other things that happen. I believe we do the same with generosity. So what I'm going to do today, forgive the ability for you to be offended, is I'm going to make the argument that you are not generous. Okay? And here is going to be your reaction to that point. No, but one time but you don't understand. A month ago but you don't get it. But I picked up 25 cards. Awesome. That is not generosity. That is a random act or a quick compulsion. See, because other people who have platforms can get very, very good at speaking emotion and riling up emotion of a group of people to get them to do a certain thing. That is not generosity. That is reacting to something that compels you. Those are not the same thing. So, what is generosity? Let me define it for you. This is my definition for our purposes today. Generosity is the premeditated, calculated, and designated release of financial assets. That is generosity. It is the premeditated, calculated, designated release of financial assets. That is what generosity is in regards to money. You can be generous with all sorts of things. It's not what I'm talking about today, and I'll tell you why in a minute. If you don't have a plan for your generosity, you cannot be generous. If you don't have a detailed plan, you are not a generous person. You are a spontaneous reaction person, but you are not a lifestyle of generosity. And if you don't have a plan, you will be one of two things. You'll either be a consumer or you will be a random acts person. And I genuinely believe that you cannot be lost financially as you wholeheartedly pursue Jesus. Those two things are incompatible. Jesus talks too much about money for you to be completely lost. You have to take this stuff seriously. You have to figure this out. And beyond that, even if you're like, well, I don't know about this whole Jesus thing. Awesome. I promise. Do this and you'll be happier. You just will. But if you call yourself a Jesus follower, there is a way that Jesus calls us to live in obedience. And it is our job to figure that out. And so as we go through this, there are a couple myths. Let me talk these things through. So myth number 1 is generosity is spontaneous. We talked about that just a moment ago, but no, it's not. Spontaneity is spontaneous. Generosity is not spontaneous. Here's why I know that. Because even greedy people can be generous spontaneously, right? Even people who don't care about anyone or anything can be compelled by some dude ringing a bell out front of a Target and drop a few dollars in for the Salvation Army. That has nothing to do with a lifestyle of generosity. Number 2, it is regulated by your cash flow. So one of the most common things you will hear is, and you've probably said some derivation of this yourself, is, oh man, I'd love to help, just right now I can't. You ever, or maybe you've had that feeling, like, oh man, I'd love to, but generous people don't say that. Generous people say, well, I've already made a decision, let me see how this factors in with that decision. Number 3, the amount is what counts. Could not be further from the truth. Because, so here's the other thing. Let's say I told you that someone walked up and gave Catalyst $1,000. Some of you would go, oh my gosh, And others of you would go, right? Because it's all relative. And it's relative to that person. I have no idea if they just gave me every cent they own, or if that's what they were going to spend the night before on dinner out with friends, and they ended up not going out. It's all relative. Who knows? Jesus actually addresses this directly in Luke chapter 21. It's a story that he's talking to his disciples, and he's talking them about generosity and wealth and all these things. And as he's doing it, he is in the shadow of what is called the temple treasury, which was a variety of different things, but for the most part, it was like this big cauldron or this big pot. And so people would go in and they would put their donation, their money in the treasury for the temple to continue its operation. And there was those who would make a really big deal. They would get all of it in coin and they'd be like, bam, and they'd make a huge noise, and there would be this overwhelming sense of, oh my gosh, that person is so wealthy. Did you see or hear how much coin, literally, they just dumped into that cauldron? Holy cow. And so he's making comments about these individuals, and he calls them wealthy. How does he know? Well, probably by the way they're dressed or appearance or something like that. And then he notices a woman, an older woman, who comes up, and he declares that she is poor. How does he know that? Probably by the way she's dressed. Probably by, maybe he knows a little bit of her story. We don't know. But he tells this story of this woman who comes up and gives what is known as the widow's mite, which is like, I mean, you could probably define it as like the speck of a piece of copper. And she drops it in. And Jesus points to that woman and says, that woman has given more than all of the others. And in the language there, what he means is than all of the others combined. She gave more because it's not about the volume or amount. It's about your heart, and it's about the sacrifice of what God is inviting you to do. The last, number 4, is that rich people are generous. Nope. It's actually the opposite. It's actually the inverse. Now, are there rich people, which again is all relative, who are generous? Yes, but by and large, that is an inverse proportionality. The more money you have, by percentage, the less you give. That has been a national across all states, churches, denominations, nonprofits. They show that overwhelmingly so, that people who are rich give just enough to trigger the tax break, and then they stop. And so there's this unique, anyway, that we could get into that later, which is like, why would we want to get into that? I don't know, but these are the things that pique my interest. So usually it goes the other way. It doesn't often go the way you would think. So just so you know, in case you haven't figured it out already, I'm going to press hard on you today. Today might get uncomfortable for you, and that's okay. And I also recognize that this may be easier for me to press because this is how I was raised. This is mostly all I've ever known. And this is how I raised my kids. So when my kids were really little and they would get their allowance, they would get it in dimes so that they could take 10% and give it to what God is doing in the world. They could take 10% and save it, and then they could live on the rest. It's how I was raised. It's been my whole adult life. I have tried as best I possibly can to live this in a way, not just because Christ commands it, but because I've been living it so long that I genuinely believe there's no other way to live. And there's no amount of money that you could pay me to live any other way. Because I believe so deeply that what Jesus actually says, if you live like this, you will actually experience true joy. And I actually believe that. And I believe it more than most things. And so, kingdom life is about managing your life. And it is never more true than with money. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to look at a couple different principles, and then I'm going to talk through some more practical things. But the principles come out of Matthew 25. So if you have a Bible and you would like to turn there, please do, to Matthew chapter 25. We're going to start in verse 14. And I want to start with giving you 3 principles to help you not get lost financially. So here we go. Matthew 25, starting in verse 14. For it will be, what will be? The kingdom of God, living as Jesus people, living like Jesus. For it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. So the first principle is this: live as a manager, not an owner. You don't own anything as much as you think you do. How do I know that? Because the day you die, it doesn't go with you. You don't own anything. Anything and everything you have can be taken from you tomorrow. You are simply a manager of the things that God has entrusted to you for a time. So that is the challenge given to these individuals. The owner is saying, I am leaving and I'm going to entrust what I have to you. Entrust meaning what he's inferring there is, I want you to manage this how I would manage it. And none of them, once receiving this stuff, went, sweet, I own this now. Not one of them. They all said, oh, okay, this is very clearly yours. I'm just managing it for a time. It is being entrusted to me for this season and this time to manage as the king would manage. Now, a talent is a measure of money. The closest approximation we have is a single talent is 20 years of income. So this is an extraordinary amount of money. In our terms, this is millions and millions of dollars. So when you are being handed, imagine you're in this camp and you're being given $1 million, and it's like, here, ensure that this is managed well. This is my wealth. I will be coming back. And so here it is to you, manage it well. Now, the issue isn't volume, it is management. And as your pastor, in every area of your life, I want you to do what God tells you to do. My hope and my prayer for you is in every area of life, you live a fully surrendered life. And one of the things that I've learned over the last 20 years of doing this is overwhelmingly, money is usually the last thing to go. Money is usually the last thing people hand over to God. And this is very practical stuff, but it is also deeply spiritual. I mean, you will hand over all sorts. You will hand over your time. You will hand over your decisions. You will hand over your career. You will hand over your sexual ethic. You will hand over everything, but not your money. God, don't touch my money. I give him $100. Back off. And here's the question I would have for you. Why? You don't need to answer this. I hope this kind of just messes with you for like a week. Until I give you the next one that messes with you. But why are you okay trusting God with your eternity but not your money? Is that not weird? That's weird. To say, yeah, I trust God to secure my soul for eternity, but don't you dare touch my budget. What? That makes no sense. That we would trust God with all of our lives for eternity, but not trust him with how we spend money tomorrow. Doesn't make any sense. So recognize that you are a manager, not an owner. Number 2, verse 16. We're going all the way to 23. Getting all up in it. Because there's another, well, I'll say this. And I'm gonna touch more on this later. But sorry, can we go back? Can we go back one more? Because I want you to see this really quick. And because I'm going to reference it later. The bottom half of that verse. To one he gave 5, to another 2 he gave 1. Each according to his ability. That is a very uncomfortable part of the verse. Note that. We'll come back to it later. Okay. Matthew 16. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had 2 talents made 2 talents more. But he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. Now after a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. There it is again. Enter into the joy of your master. And more on that joy later. But there is a clear indication that those who manage money well experience a certain set of joy that those who don't manage money well do not ever experience. And also we add to the 2 talents, come forward and saying, Master, you delivered me 2. Here I have made 2 more. And his master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over little. I will set you over much. There it is again. Enter into the joy of your master. He also who had received 1 talent came forward, saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here, you can have it back now. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant. You knew that I reap where I have not sown. You know that I'm always producing fruit wherever I go. I have not sown and gather where I scatter no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers. And at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to him who has the 10 talents. There it is again, getting more uncomfortable. For to everyone who has, more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one, I went too far. I should have stopped. I have a point, and then I'll get to the rest of it. This kind of goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Being a good money manager requires good money management. Recognize that all profit goes back to the owner. They have to report back. And there is no excuse for, I don't know. And you hear this a lot. I was reading a financial study the other day, talking about budgets. This one may or may not shock you. I forget if this was Wall Street Journal, but anyway, relevant study. They surveyed a bunch of people and said, do you have a budget? 86% were like, absolutely I have a budget. Absolutely I have a budget. But then they changed one word. Do you follow a budget? 22%. So 86%, yeah. I've got it on the Excel spreadsheet somewhere. Yeah, we wrote it down once in January. Well, do you follow it? No idea. Here's why I say that. An excuse of, well, I'm not a numbers person. Jesus doesn't seem to care. He doesn't go, oh, you're not a finance guy? Okay. All right, well, never mind. Off the hook. No, he entrusts to everyone. And here's one thing that I assume to be true about you because it is true about me and everyone else I've ever known. If you had to guess where you spend your money, you would be wrong 100% of the time. Because you'll ask people true story. The other day, my wife and I were looking at finance stuff, and she asked me, how much do you think you and the boys spend on eating out? And I was like, I don't know, $150. She's like, over what period of time? I was like, well, a month. She's like, oh, okay. Interesting. You could multiply that by 4 and you're close. It's like, what? Now, notice I am the only one with a credit card and the only one spending this money, but I also happen to be the one who, while driving home from a baseball tournament, Dad, can we stop by McDonald's? Totally! I'm that dad. And so No, and it's same with you. If you're like, I don't know, you would be shocked to know how much you spend on all the things you spend on. And all you have to do is watch any of the finance podcasts out there, Caleb Hammer, any of them, where they have their actual statements in front of them and go, how much do you think your mortgage is? Like, I don't know, $1,800, $2,795. Whoa, right? Everyone is always shocked and awed by how much things actually cost. You will never nail that number unless you are actually physically watching it all the time. And that habit of knowing actually what you spend actually takes the pressure off. It takes all the guesswork out. And here's another thing that I know about you. You want God involved with your finances. How do I know that? Because those are your prayers when you don't have any. God, would you please give me this raise? God, would you please allow the sale of this house to go through 10% more than we asked? God, would you please? God, would you please? God, would you? So if you want God involved with your finances, why don't we do it before it's a crisis? Because he wants to be involved. He wants to be a part. More than that, he wants to actually bless. That is his posture and position the whole way through. Did you know that? God's posture towards your financial wealth is blessing, which is a wild thing for a God's posture to be. To say, I want this to be a symbiotic thing where we work together, where I entrust to you, you bless, and then I bless. Just a blessing machine. That's what I want. And so many of us, we go, well, I can't, I don't know, I can't, I'll just spend it on me. Okay, Matthew 25. So here comes the uncomfortable part. You're like, now is the uncomfortable part? Chapter 25, starting in verse 24. This is where I went way too fast. All right. He who also had received the 1 talent came forward and said, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow, gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid. And I went and I hid your talent in the ground. Here you can have it back. But his master said, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew I reap where I have not sown, and to gather where I scattered no seed. Then you ought to have invested my money. At least get me interest. At least get me 3%, guy. So take the talent from him, give it to the one who has 10. For to everyone who has more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. And then a really uncomfortable verse. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That weeping and gnashing of teeth, if you've ever heard that phrase, Bible teachers or pastors or street prophets who are really like, do you want to end up in the place with weeping and gnashing of teeth? It's speaking of hell. Interesting that the first place that is introduced is tied to money. And so here's the uncomfortable one, is the last principle. Live worthy of greater responsibility. How you manage kingdom resources speaks volumes of the trust you have in God. And so don't answer this, keep this is an inside voice. From a kingdom perspective, are you worthy of God's investment? If you were looking to you as an investment of what God was doing in this world, are you a good investment? Or is it going to be squandered? Because I can tell you, you limit your kingdom impact when you're bad with money. You miss out on the joys of kingdom living when you are bad with money. When you have no idea where it's going, when you run up credit cards, when you live well beyond your means. And there's percentages for all this. When your house is worth more than, or your mortgage is more than 25% of your take home, you're living way above your house poor. Like there are so many things where we are just so stretched beyond because we're not willing to make difficult decisions to live within our means. And this is something that has not changed throughout generations. We need to think that we need to wear certain clothes and drive a certain car, kids go to a certain school, and you will squander away your life. So there's this book, really good. It's called Master Your Money by Ron Blue. And one specific thing that I want to point out is he identifies, which is true, that there are 5 things that you can do with money. Here they are. You can spend it. You can repay debt. You can pay taxes. Boo. You can, or even more taxes here in California. You can save it, or you can give it. That's it. 5 things you can do with money. Now, I want you to look at the net result of those things. So you can go me first, creditors second, which isn't really second, that's just you delayed. Right? Because all a debt repayment is just you paying for you in 3 months. Pay taxes, government third, but who gets the benefit of living in a country with the government? You. Saving, you. And others, last. Now, here's the interesting thing. The overwhelming majority of people, that order is how we live our life. We go me, 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 and if I have anything left over, sure, I guess, if it's compelling enough. The gospel invites you to live the exact opposite of that. Others, save for my future, pay the government, get rid of my debt, what's left over for me to live my life on? And I tell you what, that is about as difficult as it sounds. But that is, I'm telling you, the only way to live and experience what Jesus calls the joy of my master, to live free of all of the external pressures of what we do with money. So, what does that practically look like? Well, let's go back to the definition, or my definition, not the definition, as if I define generosity. Arrogant. Number 1, premeditated. Premeditated. And I'm going to say this as directly as I think Jesus would and as it's intended. You cannot follow Jesus and have others come last in your life. It is antithetical to the gospel. You cannot live your life in a way and say, others get the last of everything in my life. My time, my resource, my investment, my prayers, my everything. Whatever's left over, I will give others in my life. You can't follow Jesus and live that way. Because Jesus never lived that way. Just read the Gospels. It's why he talks so much about money. He talks about money more than he does heaven, hell, or anything else. Why? Because he knows how much control money has over our lives. So you actually have to think about this stuff. You will not accidentally stumble into generosity, I promise you. You will not wake up one day and be like, oh my gosh, I am generous. And look at that, I've been living that way for 15 years. Never gonna happen. What will happen is you get to the end of your life and you go, oh my gosh, I spend all my money on me and this, that will happen. If you don't actually think about it. Premeditated, you have to think about this. You have to sit down. You have to look, where is my money actually going? What am I actually spending stuff on? Why do Amazon boxes keep just randomly showing up to my doorstep all the time? Number 2, calculated. Calculated. Here is something I would strongly encourage you to do. I would strongly encourage you to pre-decide a percentage, not an amount. Why? Because percentages moves, amounts do not. And this, one of the greatest blessings for churches and nonprofits, and one of the biggest curses, is the online giving. Because people will set it and forget it and be like, here's it, and then they never go back to it. It takes no thought. It takes no intentionality to go, okay, God, what are you doing? How am I moving? How am I growing? This is something that my wife and I have tried to do from day one. We set a percentage, And then we try to give more every year than we did the year before. We try to continually outdo ourselves. And guess what I found? God's never let me down yet. Never let me down one time. And this is a keystone habit that changes everything else in your life. You know what I've never found? I've done a lot of marital counseling in my time, like a lot. And you know what I've never found? I've never found the family whose life is falling apart, but they are crushing it with finances and generosity. Never met them. Never met them. Where they're like, yeah, man, we are lock and step on where every dime goes. We have generosity all down with this, everything. We're saving for retirement. How's the rest of your marriage? Terrible. We can't communicate. It's like, wait, what? No, I'm telling you, if you can figure this out, you can figure out pretty much everything else. And then lastly, it's designated. You've already decided. It's proactive. And this, if you're like, oh, is he just trying to get people to give to the church? I don't care if you give more to the church. Find where God is doing stuff and invest in that. Is God doing a lot here? Yeah, you bet he is. But he's also doing a lot of stuff around the world. But be intentional with it. This is the only way to live. I'm telling you. This is the mantra that I've lived my life by. I encourage everyone I've ever talked about this to live the way that Jesus encourages. Give first, save second, live on the rest. Overwhelmingly, we live the opposite. We live to the tips. We save maybe because, my spouse's company gives to the 401k, so that's like saving, right? Sure, kind of, not enough. And then giving, I wish I could, maybe next month, maybe next year. Well, you've been saying that for a decade. So maybe we live differently. Maybe we say, God, what do you want me to do? And I respond with that. Then I'm going to save for my future. And I'm going to live on the rest. And I'm going to tell you what's going to happen. That live on the rest number is going to be lower than it is right now. And then you're going to have some hard decisions to make. Yeah, that maybe we don't enroll our kid in that sport anymore because we can't afford it. Or not afford. Sorry, that was the wrong choice of words. We choose to invest our money differently. That's better. Oh, we're not going to go get a new car. We're going to keep driving this 2007 Dodge Ram that has 204,000 miles on it. And no matter what I do, the oil light will not go off. For example, just, spitballing. We're just going to make a certain set of choices to live this way. And like I said, this isn't about, and now you see a little bit why it's like awkward on Give Love Sunday. You're like, oh wait, it has nothing to do with that. It has everything to do with how desperately I, as your pastor, want you to live surrendered to God. Because the people, and I know many of them, who live this way are some of the happiest people I know. They're some of the most joy-filled, excited, relaxed, stress-free, anxious-less people I know. Because they've lived this way for so long that they trust God so much. And they just live in constant response to what God is doing. And I want that for you. So say yes to God. Do the hard work. It's going to be hard. But you have all afternoon. The Niners aren't even playing. So you got all afternoon. Got to have something to do. World Series is over. No decent football is on TV. Take the afternoon. Figure this stuff out. Amen? Let us pray. God, we thank you so much for your example to us and how we are to live. And God, I am so thankful that you encourage us towards a life of generosity, a life that gives because you gave it all. And God, I know that this is difficult. I know for many who are just staring a huge pile of debt in the face, this can be beyond daunting. God, I pray that you would, by your Spirit, compel each and every one of us to do this hard work, to find joy and blessing on the other end of challenge when it comes to finances. Jesus, we love you, and it's in your name we pray. And all God's people said, amen.